Coming up, I'll tell you why more Nets trades could be on the horizon after the Cam Thomas signing and what teams could be partners. All that and more after this.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. And on today's show, I'm going to be outlining why more Nets trades could be coming before the start of the regular season. I'll detail how Cam Thomas accepting his qualifying offer creates more roster work for Brooklyn and what teams could potentially be trade partners with them. And we are officially 2 weeks away from the start of training camp. Brooklyn will have media day on September 23rd and then open camp on September 24th. And they have more roster work to do before that date. And that is a result of Cam Thomas accepting his $6 million qualifying offer and somewhat throwing a wrench into things. And not saying that, I think the Nets were prepared for that as a real possibility, but it creates more work for them because NBA teams are required to spend 90% of the salary cap before the start of the regular season. There is a salary floor that teams have to reach. And with Cam Thomas taking that 1 year, $6 million qualifying offer, the Nets are coming in below below the salary floor right now. Whereas if he took their 2 year, $30 million offer where he's making $15 million this coming season, or even the 1 year, $9.5 million offer, they would be a lot closer to that salary floor, even above it, as opposed to what they are right now. And where the finances are at, after re-signing Thomas, Day'Ron Sharpe, and Zaire Williams, Brooklyn is about $650,000 below the salary floor. But the Nets have 18 players on standard contracts right now, 4 of which have partially or non-guaranteed deals. So they're going to have to waive 3 of those players to get down to 15 standard deals. And I said that the Nets are $650,000 below the salary floor right now. If they waive 3 players, say they waive their 3 lowest paid players to get down to 15 standard contracts, they'll be around $7 million below the salary floor, which means they're going to have to make a move to add more salary before the start of the regular season. And how can they do that? There's several ways that they can do it. They can restructure contracts on their current books, although that doesn't really seem like it's in the cards, in my opinion. Or they can execute more salary dump trades, or they can sign free agents. Now, which of those are the most likely? I lean towards the salary dump route, or maybe not even a salary dump. Maybe they get a player they actually like, but what the goals are this coming season with it being a tanking agenda, I would think that they'd be trying to add assets as opposed to adding a player who's maybe going to make them potentially better this coming season. And, salary dump or the free agent route, I just am not sure that signing a free agent at this point makes any sense for a Nets team that isn't going to be trying to, really win or contend this coming season. It's really, as I said, the draft pick focus. And you look at the remaining free agents on the market right now, the top guys, it's Malcolm Brogdon, Al Horford, Gary Payton, Malik Beasley, Precious Achiuwa. Could the Nets sign one of those guys and maybe actually value them long-term? Sure, but I just don't think that it makes too much sense, with what the goals are this coming season, unless they feel they can flip one of them in a trade, or if they feel that, they can actually get them on a value deal and hold them for the foreseeable future. Of those guys, maybe they could get a Malik Beasley and try to sign him and then flip him later, but I don't think that's too likely. Or Precious Achiuwa, same thing. I just don't really see that as the most likely route that they'd go with this. It's not out of the question. So the free agent route can't be dismissed, but I feel like if that was going to happen, it would have happened by now. That's why I feel that a trade and the salary dump route is the more likely route. And we've seen Sean Marks be somewhat all in on this offseason, the salary dump route. He got, obviously, Terrence Mann from the Atlanta Hawks and got the number 22 pick in the draft, which turned into Drake Powell. They got Michael Porter Jr. for Cam Johnson, and then also got an unprotected 2032 first-round pick from the Denver Nuggets, and then recently got Haywood Highsmith from the Miami Heat alongside a future unprotected second-rounder. And that, last deal, that Haywood Highsmith deal. I feel like there could be another deal out there like that for them, and I feel for the Nets, and I feel like that's a route that they may potentially try to go. When you look at their cap space situation, I said if they waive their three lowest paid guys to get down to 15 standard contracts, they're about $7 million below the salary floor. But the team has roughly $16 million in cap space right now, and they can get to over $24 million if they waive all of their players on partially or non-guaranteed contracts. The Nets they have flexibility to work with to swing a bigger salary dump if they want, but I feel like they're going to want to maintain that the majority of that cap space going into the regular season, because you look, if the Nets spend up to the salary floor, which they're around $7 million away right now, they'll have $15 million in cap space. And if you hold that until the trade deadline, we see that there's always teams that are reevaluating things around then. Some teams are better than they expected to be. A lot of teams are worse than they expected to be. And because of that, there is roster shuffling and moves that go on at the deadline. So if you have teams that are trying to get off salary, then it behooves you to, maintain that cap flexibility and have that going into there, as opposed to maybe spending it now on something where there's not as much of a bidding war, there's not as much of a market to contend with. So I do think that a salary dump trade is definitely in the cards for the Nets. I think that that's the route that they're probably going to go to get to this salary floor. And I think that there's several teams that could be partners for them now and down the line. Who are those teams and what could they potentially be offering? I'll get into that after a quick break. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Whether you're on the golf course or just need a little extra push to power through your day, 5 Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor you love without ever touching the green. Guys, you get up early for work, maybe you're tired, aren't able to get through your day, have a few 5 Hour Energy Transfusions. You'll be chugging along in no time. Maybe you got an early tea time. The weather's still nice out. You want to get up, but you're tired. Drink a few of those, and before you know it, you'll be on the greens, hitting putts, and having a great time. Guys, golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. The grape ginger lime flavor of 5 Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without leaving the course or chasing down the beverage cart. Now you can amp up the fun for everyone. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for two to any golf tournament in the USA. Tee up that trip. Visit 5thewin.com for rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes the Masters tournament and ends October 31st, 2025. Coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about why I feel there could be more Nets trades coming before the start of the regular season. And I outlined in the opening segment how the Nets are still $7 million roughly below the salary floor, with Cam Thomas accepting his qualifying offer, his 1-year, $6 million deal. And the Nets are going to have to spend up to that salary floor before the start of the regular season. Most likely route there, I think, going to be a salary dump trade or another trade in general. But if we're talking about salary dump deals, there's one team that I feel sticks out as a potential trade partner for the Nets. And right now, that is the Philadelphia 76ers, who are reportedly trying to clear money to re-sign Quentin Grimes, who has been one of the restricted free agent holdouts this summer, alongside Cam Thomas. Philadelphia and Grimes have not been able to come to an agreement on a deal, and it seems like the 76ers are motivated to try to re-sign him and need a little bit more money to get to where Grimes and his camp want to be. And to do that, they're trying to get off some contracts. This is from Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report, said that the rumblings all offseason have been that the 76ers are going to try to get off Andre Drummond or Kelly Oubre, if not both players, before the start of the regular season. So those are two guys that if the 76ers are looking to salary dump, you look around the league, teams that are going to have an appetite to take those guys on alongside a draft pick or maybe another young player who Philadelphia attaches to them. The Nets are that team, most likely, because they have the cap space. They are the only team in the NBA with cap space remaining, and other teams just don't have that kind of financial flexibility right now where they want to add a salary like that to their books potentially. You look at what Drummond and Kelly Oubre are making right now. Drummond is on a $5 million expiring contract. Oubre is also on an expiring contract, but at $8.3 million. And I could see both of these guys being salary dump candidates for the Nets. I would say that Drummond is the more likely because he is the worst of the two and the one that clearly doesn't have any trade value and Philly would have to attach something to get off of his contract. I saw Nets Daily put out a tweet saying that Drummond, according to a league source to Nets Daily, saying Drummond is a trade possibility for the Nets. And it makes sense because you look at, what the Nets have in terms of cap space flexibility. I said they have roughly $16 million in cap space left. They could increase that to about 24 or a little bit over that if they waive their partially or non-guaranteed contracts. So the Nets could just absorb Andre Drummond into their cap space and, get a pick or a young player attached to him or whatever along those lines. They also have the room exception at $8.8 million, which in this new CBA used to be able to just sign free agents using that. You can now use that as a trade exception as well. So the Nets could also take Andre Drummond into that exception, add to their payroll, get closer to the salary floor, but still, maintain that $16 to $24 million in cap space entering the regular season and heading toward the trade deadline. So I think that could make sense. You look at what the 76ers have to offer. They have 10 second-round picks available to trade, and I think that they could be a team who looks to attach a second-round pick to a guy like Drummond to get off of him and to clear more space. And you look at Drummond, the reason that they're going to be trying to get off of him, and I think they'd be willing to attach something to bring back a player like Grimes, because Drummond really had a down year last year. We all know that he joined the Nets in that trade alongside Ben Simmons and Seth Curry and 2 first-round picks as part of a package for James Harden. He left the Nets, went to Chicago, and then Philly re-signed him last offseason, and he signed a 2-year deal, and he really had a down year last year. He wasn't effective. He looked a little bit older, struggled doing some of the things that he had done throughout his career, and Philly spent second-round picks in back-to-back drafts on center options with Adenbona and Joni Broom. So they have those two guys who are younger, cheaper alternatives who are probably better suited to play backup big man minutes behind Joel Embiid or fill in when Embiid's not on the floor. So getting off Drummond is something that makes sense. And I think that Philly would be motivated probably to attach something to him if they have to clear space to sign Quentin Grimes and restricted free agents. And you look at Kelly Oubre, I said, who's on an expiring deal at $8.38 million. I think he's less likely as a guy that the Nets would get in a salary dump because I think he potentially has, neutral value, probably not positive, but at least maybe some team would take a flyer on him where they don't have to, Philly doesn't have to attach something to him. But, I'm not sure what the appetite is for teams to get Kelly Oubre right now, because you look at him, he had good counting stats last season. He averaged like 15 points per game, playing like 34 minutes per game. So obviously heavy workload last year with Philadelphia being so injury depleted, but he shot a career worst percentage from three. He was under 30%, career low volume. The three-point shot just really hasn't been there throughout his career, but especially these last couple of seasons, he's really been a non-factor from beyond the arc. So I'm not sure that deal has, even neutral value. That might be another negative value deal. And if it is, he's another guy that the Nets could look to get. I mean, the Nets could take on both of these guys if they wanted to. I don't think they want to, because I think they'll want to preserve cap space for the reasons that I outlined before. But Kelly Oubre, $8.38 million. That's another guy. They could absorb him into their cap space. That would get them above the salary floor, perceivably. They could also just absorb him into their room exception, which is $8.8 million, as I said, and maintain the rest of their cap space. So both of these guys, I think, are players that could, have potential salary dump options, could be potential salary dump options for the Nets. In Oubre's case, if they were to get him, it could be a situation similar to what we just saw the Nets do with Haywood Highsmith, where they get him, maybe they get him, a second-round pick alongside him, and then you could potentially play him during the season and look to flip him at the deadline, which I expect to be the plan for Haywood Highsmith. So that's a deal where you could look at coming away with potentially multiple second-round picks if you're able to get positive value for him at the deadline if he plays a little bit better at the start of the regular season. And between Haywood Highsmith and, Kelly Oubre, if the Nets are able to come away with 3 to 4 second-round picks with doing that, that wouldn't be a bad outcome. But I think that would be a little difficult, bring in Oubre, giving him a role potentially to increase his value, because the Nets just have a lot of guys on the wing right now between, Michael Porter Jr., Terrence Mann, Drake Powell, Haywood Highsmith. Obviously, you have the younger guys like Dariq Whitehead and all them. So it's going to be tough, I think, for them to do that. And I'm not sure that Oubre is even going to be a guy who Philadelphia necessarily has to attach something to, because, with him having negative value as a contract, he might be neutral, at this point. But both of those guys, I think, could be options for the Nets. I would look to Philly as a team that is motivated to shed salary right now, and the Nets are definitely a good option for them if they are trying to do that. And I'd say, in Drummond's case, I need to mention that he's only on $5 million. If the Nets got him, they would still have more work to do beyond that to reach the salary floor. So the Nets have moves to make. I think they're going to do something before the start of the regular season, but I do think, as I said, that they're going to maintain some cap space going into the regular season. I'd say they probably are going to go up to that salary floor and not much above that, which will give them around $15 million in cap space going into the regular season. What deals could potentially be available for them down the line? There's one team I'm eyeing who I think could be a trade partner for the Nets in that regard. So we'll get into who that is, who could be a target, how the two sides could swing a deal when I close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. Coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, outlining why I feel more Brooklyn Nets trades are on the horizon. I just outlined why the Nets have to spend to reach the salary floor and why I think a salary dump trade or just a trade in general is the most likely route to do that. But I also said that I think the Nets are going to maintain their cap space going into the regular season, or a large chunk of it. I don't think that they'll spend much above that salary floor. And if the Nets are able to maintain that $15 million in cap space that they would have by doing that, I think there could be deals down the line that are available to them around the trade deadline or even a little bit earlier than that. And there's one team that I'd be looking at as a team that is motivated to shed salary and could look to swing a deal with the Nets, and that is the Boston Celtics. And the story of the Celtics offseason has been trying to shed money, trying to get below the second apron and the first apron, and trying to create a lot of financial flexibility, with them being in a little bit of a transitional year here, obviously, with Jason Tatum going down with the torn Achilles. They're a team that's not going to be contending this season, and it really has it has shifted their priorities to the financials. You look at where the Celtics are at right now. They are $4 million above the first apron and $12.1 million above the luxury tax. And people that I've spoken with throughout the league expect them to try to duck below both before the trade deadline and reset their books, get below the aprons, add, roster flexibility and things that allows you to do. And also getting below the luxury tax would help them to reset the repeater tax and reset the clock on that. So all of that will be beneficial for them as they enter kind of this next phase and try to retool around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Derek White and all of those guys. And with that, they're going to have to shed some salary. And the guy who is the obvious candidate to be a salary dump is Anthony Simons, who they acquired from the Portland Trailblazers earlier this offseason and got off of Drew Holiday's contract. And Simons is a guy who they have been poking around the league trying to find a trade for since then, the Celtics have, from things that I've heard. And he's on a $26.7 million expiring contract. And with it being an expiring, it's a deal that I could see the Nets taking on and trying to get involved with if it means the Celtics potentially attaching a first-round pick or some other kind of asset. And the Nets have a lot of different ways that they could do that. I have pointed out that on past shows that the Celtics don't have a center right now. I mean, look at their center room. It's Chris Boucher and Neemias Queta. Could they potentially be involved with be interested in Nick Claxton? He's a guy who's making just below what Anthony Simons is making. That could potentially make sense, but that wouldn't help them duck below the luxury tax or the first apron because they wouldn't be getting that much financial savings in that regard unless the Nets took on somebody else, and there aren't other players I think the Celtics are necessarily trying to get off of. So, there could be other interesting deals that the Nets could work out with the Nets having the cap space that they do if they retain it going towards a trade deadline. They're going to have flexibility where they could swing something. There's some deals, like just me looking at Spotrac and looking at both teams' rosters. I think there are some deals that could make sense. I mean, you look at, I said Anthony Simons making around $26.7 million. The Celtics are $12 million below the luxury or above the luxury tax. If the Nets were to put together a couple of their mid-sized contracts, they could do something where, they take on Simons, they add, exhaust most of their remaining cap space, and they also allow the Celtics to get off of, to get below the luxury tax. And then if the Nets are just taking back an expiring contracts, they have expirings, mid-sized expirings that they can give back to the Celtics. So it would really accomplish something for both teams. Like an example of something that I'm talking about, look at Cam Thomas. Like he's a guy who's making $6 million. You look at Zaire Williams, a guy I think the Nets like, but is making $6 million. And both of them, Cam isn't expiring. Zaire has a team option next season. So if you put those two guys together and you're right above $12 million and you trade, say, those two for Anthony Simons and the Celtics attach a first-round pick or whatever asset you want to say to Simons, that's a deal that works financially for both sides. And it's inspiring coming back to the Nets. So they're no worse off for wear. They get another draft asset. And from the Celtics end, they're dipping below their first apron and the luxury tax. And both of the guys that they're acquiring are expiring. So it doesn't, affect their books, and it clears space for the coming years. So I think that between those two teams, I think there could be a framework that makes sense. And you look at the Nets, like Cam Thomas is a guy who's not eligible to be traded until December 15th. Just that's like the beginning of trade season in the NBA. We saw it last year. The Nets traded Dennis Schroeder on December 15th because that is the date that free agents who signed during the prior offseason are able to be traded. So that just opens up a huge chunk of the league to be eligible to be traded. So I see and envision the Nets spending up to that salary floor and then not going much above that, because they're going to want to have that cap space, I think, around that December 15th date and leading up to the trade deadline. And at that point, I do think that the Celtics, looking to get off Anthony Simons, that could be a partner that makes sense for the Nets, with the Nets being the only team that has that kind of financial flexibility left. So a lot to dissect and digest there for you guys, but I think that there are going to be more roster moves. We've had no shortage, and that's been one of the busiest teams in the NBA this offseason, if not the busiest. And while I think they're done for the most part, they do have more work to do before the start of the regular season and leading up to the trade deadline. And I'm going to have coverage of all of that here on Locked On Nets. But that does it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. If you do not already, subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Just take a second, if you can right now, smash the like button, leave a comment if you enjoy the content. Anything that you guys can do to engage is much appreciated. Really helps out with the algorithm. But we're officially 2 weeks away from training camp. I'm expecting more roster moves, more trades, and we're going to have a lot more news leading up to Media Day. So I'll have coverage of all that and more here on Locked On Nets when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.